Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody all around the world that are joining to our another amazing session. So, my name is Sina, and I'm the community admin of Microsoft Fabric Cafe. So, it's been a month since I joined this community. So, I'm super excited to be part of this community, to be with you guys and learn new things, and to be engaged and also enjoy my coffee. So, I'm not gonna waste any time. I'm just gonna, add my slides right away. So, So yeah, today is 7th of September 2024. So 8 a.m. as usual every Saturday Pacific time. So and today is the seventh session of Fabric Coffee. So we have another uh, guest speaker, John. So he's with us today. So I'm pretty sure it's gonna be fabulous today, as usual. So uh, as usual, we if you guys have any questions, just leave those in the comments, and it will be definitely answered by John during the session. So and we have also riddles and prizes at the end of the session before ending. So yeah, let's see who's gonna be our lucky winner today. So yeah, an introduction to the Microsoft Learn community. As everybody knows, this is a tech community, and you guys uh, are able to, stay updated with the latest news and ask whatever question you have and explore actually certification with expert guidance and connect with a global network to actually grow and actually learn new knowledge. And there is also a link below, as you can see, for the Microsoft Learning Room, which is aka.ms/learning rooms, which takes you to the room and choose. You can choose your room actually based on your interests and also specific language and whatever which is a good fit and to you. So and one of the rooms in the Microsoft room is actually your room. It's called Microsoft Fabric Cafe. So as you know, it's a Microsoft Learn community, and we actually put our effort to provide learning and support to Fabric users in all level, as well as a forum for everyone to be engaged, to learn, share, and grow skills together. And in our cafe, learning meets fun while you're sipping your coffee. So, and we've got three links, as you can see. So which is our social platform that you guys could also use those, which takes you to our YouTube, LinkedIn, and also Microsoft Learning uh, room. And so just make sure you guys subscribe our YouTube channel and follow us on LinkedIn and Learning Room, and share with us whatever you actually you need. So there is actually a code of conduct, and I really appreciate you guys for hearing this, to keep our community positive, to be respectful, to have actually collaboration and embrace diversity, and stay professional and be honest and give credit and use responsibly. And if actually there is any issue, please report those. And thanks again for being part of our community. And that's going to be really awesome for us. So in this month, September, like previous month, so we've got another guest speaker. So for this month, we've got 4 guest speakers. So we're gonna start. The first one today, September 7th, and for the upcoming sessions, all the registration link they're already announced on our actually social platform. You guys could also register and mark your calendar right away. And about our previous month, if you guys miss any actually session, because we've had a wonderful session in August and previous month as well. So you can also use our social platform to rewatch those. And if you guys have any question, you could actually reach us. And for today, our guest speaker is Jon from Denmark. So let me just add him to the stage right away. So, hello, Jon. How's it going?
Hello, it's good to be here. Thank you so much for having me at the cafe this month.
That's my pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for, taking this session. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's gonna be awesome. So, before handing it over to you, so I'm just gonna ask a question that we usually ask to, all the guest speakers. So, how do you? How often do you usually use the, Microsoft Learning, and what is the, usage of this?
I personally use it all the time, and I think that the reason why I end up there all the time is because I Google all my problems, and Googling always leads to Microsoft Learn, to be honest. So and from there, it's whether it's documentation or community or whatever it is, there are many pathways, right? But I find it's an amazing resource, and I find myself quoting the documentation often. I think even in today's presentation, there's 5 links to Microsoft Learn, different pages. And then the fact that there's a community surrounding it on Teams, the forums as well, everything. I actually end up spending quite a lot of time there. So very often, I would say.
Awesome. That's cool. So I'm not gonna waste any time. I'm just gonna say one thing before going to the backstage, because I'm gonna be in the backstage, and hand it over to the Jon. So if you guys have any questions, just leave those in the comments, and it's gonna be answered by Jon. And yeah, that's all. So stage is yours, Jon. So I'm gonna be in the backstage.
I just added myself
yeah.
to the stage.
So,
hey everyone.
Here we go. We have
yeah,
Merdad here.
this-
Yeah, go ahead.
Cool, awesome. Thanks everyone for joining, and thanks Sina. I just joined late. Sina is doing great thing actually in the community, and thank you Jon for your presentation in advance. So just I see 2 attendees and comments here. We have Sritar from Hyderabad, India, and someone is saying hi to Jan Martin. Thanks everyone for joining, and I think a stage can be for Jan now, and I will be in the backstage. If there's any question, just let us know, and and enjoy the session.
Thank you so much. So I'm just gonna share your screen.
Awesome.
Yeah, perfect. There you go. Yeah, go ahead, Jon.
Thank you so much, guys. And thank you again for having me at the Fabric Cafe. I've really been excited for today. As you might have heard from the introduction, I'm located in Denmark. So time is 5 right now. So it's not really the morning coffee for me. It's rather the afternoon coffee, maybe the last cup of the day. But I really appreciate being able to join a global community like this. And I've cooked up a brand new session for you guys. It's never been held before, but it's on a topic that's dear to my heart, and that is Dataflow Gen2, and a topic which I think is one that many are curious about, and that is how to work with APIs in Dataflows. Before we dive too much into it, just the very brief details about myself. My name is Jon, or John, if that's any easier to English speakers. I'm 28 years old, living in Copenhagen, and just came home from my weekend bike ride. That's why my hair might look a little wet. I hope you can accept that. And I love to play with any kind of puzzles, and I think that's kind of what put me in the data world as well, because working with data is like solving puzzles every day, right? The agenda for today and what we're going to cover in the next 45 minutes or so is a little bit of setting the stage, framing Dataflow Gen2 as a concept in Microsoft Fabric. What is it, and how does it compare to other features you may know? We're going to talk about a general perspective on working with APIs in Dataflow Gen2. I'm going to try and do my best to give you almost like a recipe that you can follow when you want to work with APIs. And then I have a live walkthrough of what you need to do to actually download your Strava data, as an example. Strava being the online exercise logging platform that is used worldwide. At the end, there's the traditional Fabric Cafe riddles, 3 of them that I am sure there are some good prizes I heard something about. And in addition to that, Q&A at the end is also possible. But as was mentioned in the beginning, please write any questions that you have in the chat, and I'll try to do some breaks every 10 minutes or so to sort of catch up with questions that, and hopefully they are more relevant to the topic at that time. So that's the overview and what you can expect from today. So what is the deal with Dataflow Gen2? Well, I would think that many people who are on this session here, they are probably familiar with either Dataflow Gen1, the experience that you might know from the Power BI service, the ETL tool where you can connect to data, transform, and then output it to Power BI. You may also know Dataflow Gen1 from the Power Platform, where you can actually output data to Dataverse. And if you're not familiar with data flows, then you're probably, or at least have heard about probably Power Query, right? The built-in tool in Excel and Power BI and so forth. And the deal with Dataflow Gen2 is that Microsoft, they've gone ahead and said, well, data flows in the Power BI service, they were cool, but we want to make them even better. And they are trying to add new features, make them perform better, do all kinds of stuff. I won't list all of the changes between Dataflow Gen1 and Gen2, but what you should know is that it is part of the data factory experience. So it's kind of side by side compared to data factory pipelines in a way. It's seen as this ingestion, transformation, loading tool, right? And the good thing, the news of Dataflow Gen2 really, as compared to Dataflow Gen1 in the Power BI service, to me, the biggest change is that we can now output the results of our queries in the data flow to a data destination, choosing between the 4 that you see at the bottom, the lakehouse or warehouse in your OneLake, and Azure SQL database, or even the Azure Data Explorer. And that marks a huge change in how we can leverage data flows from Gen1 to Gen2. The Gen1 data flow only really being useful for single Power BI reports. All of a sudden, we may leverage data flows in our data platforms to ingest, transform, and load data. And that really is a huge paradigm shift in the way that we can talk data flows. And I think what the reason for Microsoft doing this is because the mission of Fabric is to empower all kinds of users, right? And allow different data personas to work side by side. So to the user who may not be using notebooks or data pipelines to do data ingestion work, to the low-code user you have a feasible alternative in Dataflows to actually contribute to that common data platform in one lake. And I think that's awesome that is becoming sort of more acceptable to do data ingestion and transformation in a low-code style on a data platform like Microsoft Fabric. And that's why I'm a huge proponent. I come from a Power BI background myself and have since expanded into both Power Apps and Automate and now Fabric as well. I'm a huge proponent of using Dataflows. A quick overview here of some of the changes. And the reason I have this slide, and this is of course from Microsoft Learn, is that I also do want to mention that there are some limitations of Dataflows Gen2 currently. Most notably, second from the bottom, the lack of incremental refresh in Dataflows Gen2 is annoying. It's a fact that we have to currently deal with. I would not be surprised if they have an announcement for this come the European Fabric Conference just a few weeks from now. I believe it's on the roadmap already, the incremental refresh for Dataflow Gen2. But that is, if you ask me, the biggest missing piece of the puzzle currently. One other general note on Dataflows when we talk about Dataflow Gen2 as a feasible alternative for data ingestion and transformation is that it occasionally catches some flack for its poor performance. And I think that critique is definitely merited to some extent. Data flows, if not built efficiently, are expensive in terms of capacity units. They will eat up your Fabric capacity units very fast if you do heavy, complex transformations on large data sets. If what you're looking to do is transform small amounts of data or load and load small amounts of data, or even load large amounts of data without transformation, it can perform really well. They recently introduced this concept of fast copy, which works as an optimization feature in Dataflows Gen2, which really dramatically lowers the CU consumption of your data flows. But on the flip side, there are not a lot of transformations that you're allowed to do for this fast copy to work. So I think the whole discussion about should you use data flows versus pipelines versus notebooks for ingestion and transformation is super interesting. I'd say that while data flows are definitely not the most performant of the three, it's the most accessible of the three. So my honest opinion about data flows is, if it's what you are able to build, then that's your solution. Use data flows. If you're able to build pipelines and notebooks, it might be better in the long run for your organization. Just my 2 cents. With that said, coming from a Power BI perspective, huge fan of data flows, and that's why I'm here today to talk about APIs. And APIs and data.
Sorry, John. Sorry to interrupt you, because there's someone is saying, is it possible to hide the share screen?
Oh,
kind of maybe annoying to
that
someone.
one. Yeah. I didn't know you could see it. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah,
that's
go
fine.
ahead. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, go ahead.
Awesome. That's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you for mentioning that. Whoever did that, that's very kind of you. All right. Where did we leave off? APIs and data flows Gen2. That's kind of where we put the code into low code, because, you know, if you've been working with Power Query data flows in the past, there's a lot of stuff you can do with the graphical user interface, right? Occasionally, however, you do have to jump into that advanced editor and do a little bit of coding in M code. Even if you haven't done that, perhaps you've tried to add custom columns while you do something that looks a little similar to M code. And when we work with APIs and data flows, we unfortunately, we do have to put the code in low code and do have to accept the fact that we're going to have to do a little bit of that. And that's what I'm going to try to make as digestible for you today as at all possible. I'm going to try my best to give you this kind of recipe or cookbook that you can follow to work with APIs. But I think a major point I just want to highlight is that APIs are all born different. You will have to check the API documentation for your specific API use case to see which URLs you need to use and the parameters you can pass and all these things. We'll get into that in a second. But the general philosophy that I'm going to explain to you today should be applicable in most, if not all, scenarios. Then another note I wanted to just add is that this is not an easy topic. While I'm going to try to make it as easy as possible, there are for some reason, a lot of ways that API calls in Dataflow Gen 2 can fail. I'm going to cover some of them at the end after the demonstration. But you might experience when trying this yourself that a query which runs perfectly fine while you're in the editor will fail when you save and close the editor and try to refresh the flow via the service. And that's something that I think is boggling many people. And I'm going to try my best today to address as many of the potential pitfalls as possible. Today, we're going to work with the Strava API as an example. As you can maybe tell, I'm a bit of a bicycling nerd. I like to track my own workouts. And the demonstration that I have for you today will we're going to try and load all my workout data into a Fabric data warehouse through the Dataflow Gen 2 experience. If you're not familiar with Strava, the super quick rundown is that you install Strava on your phone or on your smartwatch. You start and stop your workouts, and they're saved to the Strava cloud application. And all these activities that you save on your user profile, they include a ton of metrics and a ton of data points that you can extract through this API. This means that this API has a bunch of methods that are accessible through the Strava API documentation. That will be accessible if you're curious about this specific example through the link here. We'll make sure, of course, that the slides are accessible after the presentation. So now for the cookbook. And I'm going to start by highlighting the 7 questions and considerations you'll have to do every time you make API calls. The first thing you got to ask yourself is, what type of API call do you want to make? I'm going to go a little bit in detail with that, with each of these 7 steps. But on an overall basis, this means, are you going to make a GET request or a POST request? And that has to do with whether you're simply going to fetch raw data or if you need to also pass some parameters back to the API. Then you need to figure out which URL you're trying to reach. You need to figure out which dynamic parts the URL might have. You need to figure out if there are any filters that you want to apply to your API call. You need to figure out if you need to pass any authorization tokens or other headers as part of the API call. You need to pass information about any other content to the API, then you also need to consider that. And finally, you'll need to figure out which output does the API give. And it's not like you need to figure out these 7 steps before you start. You can kind of do this one step at a time, working with it in the Dataflow editor, starting with the URL, figuring out how it works, all of that. Quick notes on each of these steps. GET versus POST request, mentioned it very briefly before. There's a difference between these. However, when we work with it in Power Query, you're gonna almost automatically make this choice depending on whether or not you are passing data with your API call. If you make an API call without any additional content, you're making a GET request, you're simply getting data from the API. If you, as part of your request, will send some content to the API as well, it's a POST request, but a POST request might still return you a response. And in reality, at least most of the more sophisticated APIs out there will probably require you to do a mix of those two along the way. Now, when it comes to actually constructing the API call inside of the Dataflow, there is the most essential function for you to know, and where the code part kind of comes in, is that we need to use a function called web.contents. And don't worry about all of this description here. I'm going to just jump right into an example. So if I want to call a basic method from the Strava API, I'm going to go ahead and from the documentation find the base URL of the method that I'm calling. This would be the strava.com/API/v3/athlete. Kind of long, but that's the base URL because that will be fixed for the duration of my working with the Strava API. Anytime I make a Strava API call that has to do with the athlete's data, that's the base URL I'm using. Then there is a relative path. And that's because after athlete, there are many different methods that I could call to return different types of data. I can call activities, like I'm suggesting here, to get the activity data for my profile. If I had saved some bicycle routes on my profile, I could have called the routes endpoint, the routes method, to get that data downloaded. And then in addition to that, I might pass certain URL parameters as well. In this case, I'm saying start at page 1 and give me 100 results per page. So that's kind of a filter. In this case, it's more of a URL parameter, but occasionally you might also pass filters to your request like this. It could be that I'm saying I only want activities with the exercise type bike workout so that I don't get my runs. And that would be possible to pass as a URL parameter. And these three items together, they make up the final URL that we're going to wrap in this web.contents method. And how exactly we're going to do that in the data flow, I will show you when we jump into the live demonstration in a second. So after you got this URL figured out, I want to call the athlete base URL. I want to get the activities for an athlete, and I want to get them with these parameters. Then what do? Well, oh, I guess I forgot I had this slide. Just wanted to mention that sometimes you don't need URL parameters after all. For example, with the Strava API, if I just want to get the authentication token, there are no URL parameters, and the full URL would just look like this. After figuring out the URL, you need to figure out if you need to specify any headers that the API needs to understand your request. For example, when interfacing the Strava API, I need to include a header here that specifies a content type as application JSON. And this is something for the API to understand the language that we are talking about here. For other APIs, you may need to specify other headers. You will need to read the API documentation of your API to figure out which headers to put here. But the syntax for doing it in Power Query, in Dataflow Gen2, and the point of this slide is to show you that this is how you would then put that into the code in your M code, in your advanced editor. So before we had just web contents with the URL, and now before the final parenthesis, we're going to put a comma, and then in square brackets, we're going to denote headers. And then for each header, we're going to put a square bracket with the header information below. In addition to the headers, there might be additional content. You could say it's almost like sending an email, right? The header is the subject line, and then the body of the email would be the content. And in my case here, when I want to get and refresh an authorization token for Strava, I will need to pass it the client ID of my Strava developer application, and I will need to pass it a client secret, a secret ID that ensures that I'm allowed to call this API. And to get this working in data flows, you will need to wrap this inside of a text to binary function. This is going to wrap it in or translate this text string into something that the API can understand. And then we're going to put that inside of our square bracket as well, but under the content label. And a good way to distinguish between, if you're curious, am I making a GET request or a POST request with my data flow? If there is a content element in your code, then you're making a POST request. In other programs, if you're using Postman and other such tools, there will be often, a button or a drop-down where you can choose if you're using GET or POST or something like that. In data flows, it doesn't work like that. It's a GET request until you specify something in this content parameter. As soon as you do that, it becomes a POST request, and the engine automatically sends it as a POST request to the API, so you don't need to worry about that. I think that's nice, but some people get confused by that part. Then at the very end, you might recall that the last step of my 7 questions was, what output does this API then return? And in the case of Strava, it returns a JSON document. And to unpack that in Dataflow Gen2, we're going to use the JSON.document formula and wrap that around our entire API call. And this right here, this entire text here is all that's needed to call the Strava API and get a new authorization token. Because the Strava API requires us every time, or not every time, but if we don't do it every time, our authorization will expire after a couple of hours, and we'll need to re-authenticate and all that. So it's much easier to call this token endpoint and receive a new authorization token. Your API might work slightly different. Some APIs don't even require authorization, or at least might not require a token. And in that case, you'll need to work around it in different ways. But this is often the case. You'll need to find a token, and this would be the URL that lets you do that with Strava. And again, I will show you in Dataflow Gen2 in a second exactly how this works step by step. So this is the full example of that query, just with a bit of color coding to help you understand each parts of this. So I'm using the web.contents m function to call my base URL, which uses the token relative path. Then I don't have any URL parameters this time, but I'm passing a header that specifies the content type, says that this is JSON. And then I have a content parameter where I'm passing all of these text strings. At the end, I get an output in JSON format, and I need to pass that with JSON.document. So as you can tell, there is a little bit of coding here, but I would call this low code, because what this mostly is a URL and 2 parameters. And I think that even people who are not used to coding, they will be able to do this very swiftly. And after we've done this, the rest of the work we're going to do with the API is going to be using the graphical user interface in Dataflows. So really constructing this little part here, that's all the code you're going to have to do. Well, you're going to have to do it for each method, right? So after getting the token, I'm going to do another call to get the activities, but it will work in exactly the same way. I'm just going to replace the URL with something different. Okay, I think it's time to show the elephant. So what we're going to do step by step, or rather, I'm going to show you screenshots of the first 3 steps because they are kind of a one-time setup. And then the rest will be in Microsoft Fabric. The first step is to create a Strava developer application and get that client ID and secret that we need to tell the application who we are. Then to authenticate a specific athlete and get their permission to download their data, you'll need to send a link to the user. So in this case, I made a link for myself I had to access with my browser, and that will give an initial access token that I can use to get the refresh token that I can subsequently use. And then I use Postman to do this initial token exchange. And then in the data flow, we'll create a query to refresh the token, create a query to handle pagination, and create a query to download all the data. This is an example of what that Strava interface looks like when you create a new Strava API application. It looks like this, and you can grab your client ID from here, and you can copy your secret from here. Then what you do is you construct this URL, and this always has the same format, strava.com/etc., etc. Then you need to input the client ID, and you need to input the scope. In this case, I just set it to read instead of read all, so I didn't give access to everything, but I mean, it's my personal application. And what happens is if I open this URL in the browser, I get the ability to authorize. And after clicking authorize, the user will be redirected to a page where a code will appear up here in the browser. And that code is needed for the initial token exchange. There are ways to programmatically do this. If you know notebooks and everything, you can kind of do this in a more elegant way. But doing it low code style, you'd be using a browser to paste this URL, get this code. And then I used Postman for this initial token exchange. I made a post request. You'll have to read your API documentation to see if this is needed. But I needed to send that initial token, this code, in addition to my secret. And as an output, I then got a refresh token. And this refresh token, I have embedded that inside of my data flow as a parameter, so I can reuse that every time. Now it's time to go into the data flow. So let's assume that I did these 3 steps already. I created a Strava application. I authorized the application to use my athlete ID, my Strava account, and I created this initial refresh token. Now I'm gonna go over to my browser. There we go. And show you that I'm currently inside a Dataflow Gen2 application, or a Dataflow Gen2. So this is just in a workspace. I've created a data flow, and this is, where the rest of the magic happens. We're gonna do 3 different things here. We're gonna first get the refresh token. Then we're gonna do a call to understand how many pages worth of data do I need to download activities for. And then I'm gonna download the actual activities. When you wanna get your token, you'll need to specify that URL that I showed the example of before. And you'll notice that the code that you see here will be exactly similar to what you saw in the PowerPoint before, down to this part really. However, it's not identical because I did something a little different. Instead of writing JSON document, web contents, and then having the whole URL down here, I parameterized this a little. This is not something you need to do, but it makes the code easier to understand and debug. So what you can do is in Power Query, in the advanced editor, you can specify parameters in line in your code like this. So if I want to specify a parameter called URL, I can put my base URL, including my relative path if I wanted to, right here. Then I can also specify what needs to go in the headers. In this case, content type, application JSON. And then I called it body here. I really should have just called it content. I can specify that weird string that I need to pass. One thing to note when working with Dataflow Gen2, just a small tip, is that if you need to embed strings, you might need to use double quotes for the data flow to understand this. This is a common issue that people will write single quotes around their content parameters. In many cases, that will fail. But after defining these parameters, I can simply go ahead and use the parameters inside of this formula. So I'm calling web.contents with the URL, with the headers, and with the content explained above. And then I'm outputting that in source. And what does that look like? If I go up to the source step here, this is the output of my API call. And that's, that was refreshed just now. So this is me live actually acquiring a new refresh token from the Strava API from that line of code. I think that is low code. If you disagree with me, that's totally fine. From here though, the rest of the steps that I'm doing in get refresh token, that's just regular Power Query steps. So this is a record right now. And to manipulate this data, I can convert this to a table. That's what I've done with the next step. Then in convert to table here, it's gonna take a little second to run here. I'm gonna say I don't need all those parameters that we saw before. I really hope this runs a little faster in a second. Let's see. Here. So instead of getting all the parameters, I just said I just want the one row that had the access token. I don't need to know when it expires. I just want the access token. Then I can remove one of the columns to just get the token. And then because I know that this API requires me to add a prefix called bearer, I can simply do that through the interface as well. So the way you do this is from remove columns here, you can right click and say drill down. That's going to do this next step here. And when you just have a text value like this, you can go up to format and add a prefix. And I added the prefix bearer. And now this right here could essentially be turned into a function if we wanted to. However, what I realized with the Strava API is that I actually need to do this entire step. Everything that's in my advanced editor here, I need to do that in my other methods as well. So I saved it right here in a separate folder, but because of, and I'll get into that a little later, the way that Dataflows kind of gets the schema of the API output, it's not always happy if you cross-reference queries. So you won't see me do that so much. I don't need to have this query separately here. I could just do it inside of one of the other queries, but I wanted to show you just how do we get this raw new refresh token. Now, the next thing for me to download my Strava data is to figure out how many pages of activities do I have on my profile. And that's because the limit of the number of activities that I can get with one API call from Dataflows towards Strava is 100. And I have many years of activities on there. So I know that I need to figure out how many pages worth of data do I have. And to do that, I'm making another call here to the API, and I'm this time just to showcase that you can use functions in Dataflows. I did here specify a function which will accept your refresh token as text, but is otherwise exactly the same thing as we looked at earlier. There is a web.contents with a base URL, and then there is a payload here consisting of a relative path and some headers. And again, this syntax looks a little different from what we did earlier, but it's also to show you that there are many different ways of doing this. In this case, I didn't put the relative path directly into the URL because I wanted to show you that we can make this dynamic for athletes. So say I had authorization for multiple athletes. I could have a list of different athlete IDs, and I could loop through them with this function if I wanted to. However, in this case, I am just going to call one athlete my own, and I'm going to do a call here to get my number of pages. So again, I'm going to construct the call to get my bearer token. So this piece of code here is exactly the same as we had up here. But I was getting refresh errors when I tried to reference the other query, so I had to put it in here. Sometimes you might be okay referencing the other query, sometimes maybe not. Now I'm going to invoke my function from before to call the method to get the number of activities. And I'm going to pass to it the token that I'm getting as an output here. So essentially what that looks like is, all the steps here at the top. That is the general URL that's being constructed. And then I'm calling my fx get number of pages with the token. And what do I get out? Well, I get the return information from Strava telling me everything about my profile, my athlete on Strava. And from here, again, it's all low-code transformations. I can convert this to a table. Now it's probably going to be slow again. Not too bad. I can filter to say, well, I only want to know how many activity totals I have. Because if I expand that value and I change the type to be a number, I can first sum them all together. So I had 551 activities altogether. And now if I divide this by 100 and round up, then I will get the number of pages I need to loop through in order to download all my activities. So now that I have this number, 6, I know I need to get 6 pages. Well, if I convert this to a table again, and I add a new column using a little bit of M code again, or first I'm going to add a column with a start page to say I'm going to need all the pages from 1 to 6. Then I can create a new column with a list using this syntax here from start page to, I could have called this end page for good measure. And when I expand that, I'll get all the numbers between 1 and 6. I can now remove all the other columns, change this type to something that we can work with, in this case, just a text. And now I have an initial list of pages that I can loop through to create 6 different API calls with my final query in the data flow to get all 6 pages of results. So my last query, how does that one look? Once again, I do the exact same thing as we always do to get my authorization token refreshed. Then I actually reference get pages. So after calling all the URL stuff, the first thing I do is I reference get pages. So I simply get those 6 items to start with. And now I can build my API call URL on each of these rows with clever use of add columns. So I'm going to first add a column with my token, the one that we're going to pass as part of the parameters of the relative path. Then I'm going to build a relative path here that is simply a concatenation of activities and page. And then I'm getting the page number to say I want, on the first row, I want to download page 1. On the 4th row, I want to download page 4, etc. Changing the type here, add a new column to call web.contents, put in the base URL, and as relative path, reference the relative path, and as headers, I'm going to reference my token. This is a valid API call, and it's going to do it 6 times. So right here, there are 6 different post methods. It's actually not post methods. This is get methods because there's no content. But there are 6 different get methods here, passing a token to the API, returning my activity data. And if I click this combine button, oh, actually first, I'm going to get the JSON document of that custom output. That's another thing I learned the hard way. I could not put my JSON document in this piece of the code. Otherwise, my flow refresh would fail. But putting it into a separate step worked. And now if this would load, I would get the JSON document of these outputs. And if I combine them and expand them, what I get is simply a full list of all my activities, 551 of them. I can remove the redundant columns. I can change all the data types. And there we go. That's all my activity data. The only step left is to add a data destination. You do that. That's the new thing in Dataflow Gen2. You can do it from down here. You can do it from up here. If I choose a warehouse, I can only choose destinations within my workspace. If I choose lake houses, I can even output to destinations in other workspaces. But in this case, I can put it inside my warehouse for the purpose. I already have one writing there, so I won't do it fully this time, but you'll get to remap all of your columns and say this column should map to this destination column in the warehouse. You'll see here, and you can specify the source type, and you can choose whether to append or replace. In this case, because I have 551 records, I just replace every time. And the result, the end result, is if I go back to my workspace, oh, I need to close this. Yeah. Good thing about Strava Dataflow Gen2 as well is that they auto-save, which is really nice. Go into the warehouse here. You'll see that I have a table called Strava Activities. And if this just wants to wake up, you'll get to see, hopefully, the ride that I did this morning back here in Copenhagen. Okay, that's not in, it's not filtered. But you get the point. This is all of my data from the straight from the Strava API. I think this is a good time to do a few questions, Sina, if there are some that you want to highlight. Apologies for it taking so long, but I was getting too invested here.
No worries, man. Thank you so much. Thanks for your effort. And there is actually just one question so far. Because I'm gonna display it. So the Streetheart says storage cost is separate.
What was the question again? Sorry.
Storage cost is separate.
Storage cost is separate. Yeah, great question. Yeah, so that's the same as for all else of Fabric. You will both pay in terms of capacity units, right, which are consumed from your capacity when the data flow runs. And in addition to that, you will pay for the data storage in OneLake as well. It's very comparable to data lake storage prices. It's not far from that. Maybe it's slightly more expensive, but I don't have the exact price.
And just one another question that pops up right now.
Mhm.
Sridhar asked from CU.
Sorry, one more time.
There's a question. Can you, see the display on the
Oh, let me just go
screen?
back. Yeah.
From
Which was the question?
you can see that in the comments. It's on the display.
It's on the display.
On the
I cannot see that. From CU. I just
Yeah.
don't see. Oh, on the comments.
oh yeah.
Okay. Where is that?
The storage. Yeah.
The storage cost is separate from CU. Yes, the same question. Yeah. So it is two separate billing parts of the billing process that you will need to that you will need to pay for. So the capacity units is paid through your capacity, but you will be billed separately for the data storage in your OneLake. That is correctly understood. Yeah. Can we use this only for REST API? Right. As far as I know, yes.
Yeah. Perfect.
And just to, since time is running fast, just want to run over a few of the pitfalls that you might encounter, and then we'll jump into those riddles at the end.
Yeah,
So
for sure. Go ahead.
I already mentioned some of them. You'll probably see this a lot when you start trying this out. Don't expect to succeed first time. There's a lot of trial and error with this. You might see, that one or more of your flows failed, but others succeeded. Often it'll give you a very nondescript issue. There was a problem refreshing the data flow. Sometimes though, you'll get something a little more helpful. We cannot convert a value of type table to type text. This is the error you will get if you try to reference the method to call the token from another query. So if you try to sort of split up your query into reusable parts, which would be a really nice thing to do, occasionally this happens. And I have a feeling that this varies a little from API to API, what is allowed, and has to do with the engine has to be able to call the URL that you specify and authenticate to some extent against it directly to get like a static schema result back. And if that fails, then it throws an error. And that static check can fail if the authorization token is coming from another query. So that's at least one thing you can try if you get this error is to do like I did and simply copy that code to get the bearer token into the same flow. Other times, you might simply have constructed your relative path wrong. Maybe you have a typo in there, or you're passing a parameter to the API that it doesn't understand. Then it might say that your data source credentials are missing. In addition to that, Chris Webb has created a couple of blogs that I'll highly recommend anybody who's working with data flows and APIs to check out. Just search for Chris Webb API or this title exactly, or grab the link from within this presentation. He has a couple of great examples of how you can overcome this issue with the URL validation that I just talked about. With that, I think it's time to maybe go to the riddles. And I don't know how you guys want to do this, Sina. Do you want me to read the riddle and then?
Yeah, for sure. I need you to read those and see, what our attendees answered those. Yeah. And after that, we can show the answers. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So riddle number 1 here. I whisper through the winds as you pedal and you heave, charting every path, your triumphs I weave. Climb the leaderboard, chase the ghost of your best. Who am I that turns each workout into a quest? And now I, of course, can't see the chat, so perhaps you can read some of the suggestions that come up, Sina.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'll share with you right away.
See someone saying relative path.
Yeah.
It's a good suggestion, but not quite what we're looking for here. I might be looking for a certain application.
Yeah.
Used in one of the examples today.
And there is another one.
The Strava is exactly the answer. I'm not sure who of Miriam or Sabrina was faster there. I don't think any of the spellings are correct, but I'm sure you both are indeed referencing Strava, the application that I used for the demonstration today. So that is indeed the correct answer. Do you want me to go to the next riddle, Sina?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So number 2, I'm not a letter, yet I deliver data anew. In the realm of rest, I create something true. If you can figure out what that riddle is alluding to, please let us know. API is being mentioned. Perhaps it has to do with a certain type of call that we can do to REST APIs. I might have created difficult riddles this time around.
Yeah, you did.
Sabrina got it. It's a post request, of course. If we want to deliver data to the API, we need to do it with a post request. And the third and final riddle here, I flow without water, run without legs. I can tell you a story or calculate your pecs. What am I? And perhaps this has to do with something inside of Fabric.
Post API.
That's a good suggestion, but that was the answer for riddle number 2 and not for 3. I'm looking for something that we've been working with a lot today, and Pavel has it. It is indeed, of course, a data flow. Data flows without water and runs without legs. So that was the 3 riddles that I had for you guys today, and I'm really happy that you guys tuned in for my session. I'm not sure if we want to spend the last 2 minutes for more Q&A, or if you have something you need to say as part of the roundup. But just wanted to leave just the last slide here on the screen at least, and in case people want to connect. I'm happy to try and answer your questions regarding this functionality.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank you again for your time, Jon, and thanks for your effort. And so our today's winner is gonna be for sure Sabrina, because we've got 3 riddles, and Sabrina answered most. And so I just need Sabrina to, reach out to us, and we will actually forward the voucher right away. And that's really awesome. So, and thank you again, Jon, for today's session. That was really awesome. That was really helpful. So, I'm just gonna, add my slide. So, as I've already mentioned, so we've got 4 amazing sessions this month, September, because one of those, which is already done by Jon, that was really awesome. So for the upcoming session, so before that, if you guys, joined late or missed something, you could also use our social platform to rewatch those. And for the upcoming sessions, so the registration links, if have already announced on our social platform. You guys can go for it and set your calendar for the upcoming session. So and thanks again for attending today's amazing session. So just stay tuned for the upcoming. As usual, we have amazing session every single Saturday, 8 a.m. Pacific time. And just make sure subscribe us on YouTube channel. So and follow us on our LinkedIn page. So, and Learning Room, if you guys have, got any certification, just mentioned your community, Microsoft Fabric Cafe, John, and also just let's celebrate together. So, yeah, I'm just gonna wrap it up right away. I'm not gonna waste any time. So, thank you again, John. If you want to add something before ending the session, yeah, go ahead.
Just want to say thank you for sticking with me through a complex topic. I know it's not easy to work with APIs, especially if you come from a low code background. So thank you for your patience, and I hope that you are feeling okay trying to tackle this in your organizations. I would love to see some of the results if you try it out.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you so much. And you guys, I wish you guys have a good weekend along with your family until the next Saturday. So take care.
See you. Bye.